On this channel, we often show you things that for some reason aren't shown anywhere else. We also discuss popular topics that others are talking about. It's clear why they're talking about it because it's interesting. But I've seen many times that small, almost unnoticeable events can turn history in an unexpected direction. If you don't pay attention to them, you won't understand why something happened. And without them, without these seemingly minor events, it's hard, if not impossible, to understand what's happening. For example, in the last segment today, we'll talk about Greenland. You probably already forgot about it. It's at the center of the China-Russia-United States struggle. But wait, before the actual story, I think you'll find it very interesting. Today we're talking about an unexpected turn of events, kind of a shift in the direction of events toward Ukraine. This includes Trump's position and the outstanding work of Ukrainian intelligence. And also today, the results of meetings, at least 2 of them. Bibi with Donald. Bibi said that Israel has never had such cooperation and mutual understanding as it does now. Well, Israel exists. How long? 76 years and a little more? So, well, just think about it. In these 76 years, let's start with Trump's key phrase about Russia. It was said today.
Putin constantly throws nonsense at us. For the truth,
You could say that it's very undiplomatic, you could say yes, or you could say that it's the plain truth. We all hope that Putin would be, how should I put it, more precise, smarter. We knew he was a killer, a thief, a fascist, a scoundrel, but we kind of hoped he would be smarter. But he remained the same street thug from the back alleys of St. Petersburg as he always was.
It's always very pleasant, but in the end, it turns out to be meaningless. Do you want to sign this at you?
Grinty Grandma's project about sanctions against Russia. Do you want him to accept it too?
I'm considering it. Yes, the Senate is adopting and has already adopted a very tough sanctions bill. I'm looking at it.
You can sign it.
This is a non-binding bill. It's completely up to me. They passed it. It's completely up to me. And to stop it is also completely up to me. I am seriously considering this.
Yes, that means Trump's time is coming to an end. Arguments for smart people. He kind of always expected and thought that he was dealing with a smart person, and now he'll have to start using arguments for idiots. Completely different, absolutely different approaches. Well, he couldn't say, Putin, you're a jerk. That's it. Of course, he's an unusual politician over there. I've actually only seen that in big business where there's no time for dodging, for tricks, for some stupid deceptions. It doesn't mean that everyone is honest with you, that everyone will only tell the truth and nothing but the truth. It means that the word you give, you are responsible for it. Well, you know, like the crooks used to say, you have to answer for your words. The first person from this field that I worked with, that I was lucky enough to work with, well, I mean from the field where the numbers start with the letter B for billion, which in Russian means milliard. He told me the truth. Does he speak much more profitably? And also his phrase, well, let me try to translate it from English, something like, well, you'll make a quick buck. And the business ended forever. Just like now with Stiv, with that billionaire, somewhere around 91, maybe 92, we signed a contract with Leningrad State University. That's Leningrad State University. Now it's St. Petersburg University. The contract, I think, was for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, with a turnover of about $20 to $30 million. Per year, by the way, either for 3 years or 5, the turnover was $20 to $30 million per year. And both parties were supposed to earn, together, so to speak, about 15% of that amount. A legal, good, attractive project, so to speak, connected with Europe, with timber, with Switzerland, and something else, so to speak, a good project. We financed it, they did everything well. So we sent the first trial amount, $54,000, which they immediately stole. That's it. They immediately stole it. They stole $54,000 right away. And when none of those who stole it could explain to me why they would sacrifice $1.5 million a year just to steal $54,000, and then by court order, they gave it all back to us. Every penny was returned by court order. So that means vice versa. I didn't know him back then. I probably met him about 6 months after that brilliant project. He was working at the first department of that very university at the time. And I remember I was very irritated, shocked, and I couldn't understand either the rector, whom the mayor introduced me to and with whom I dealt directly, or that guy. Seryozha Bagayev, I think Bagayev, yeah, the one who was later killed, the one who signed our agreement. And I completely understand Trump. Russians just don't fit into common sense. And by the way, Trump, judging by his statements, is equally surprised by the lies of Russians and the hatred of Ukrainians toward him.
Well, just listen, I'm very unhappy with him. There's no reason for that. It turned out to be harder, but it's just harder, that's all. I'll say that the Ukrainians were brave, but we gave them the best equipment ever made. We gave them anti-tank systems that destroy tanks. I mean, you just point them at a tank and the tank disappears. We gave them the newest and best missiles. They were able to shoot down a lot of things that would normally have destroyed them. You know, it probably would have been a very quick war. It would have been a war that lasted 3 or 4 days. But they had the advantage of incredible equipment, and Europe gave it to them. We gave them much more, because Biden shouldn't have done that. He should have leveled the playing field. We should have given them as much or even less than Europe. This concerns Europe much more than it does us. But we put more than $300 billion in there. Europe put in more than $100 billion. But still, Europe gave a lot. And I'll say the Ukrainians gave that money and showed courage. Because who was supposed to handle the weapons here? They wouldn't have had the courage for that, so they fought very bravely. But we gave them the best equipment in the world. We produced the best military equipment, and that's a fact. There's no one else close. If you look at equipment from other countries, it's not even close. Everyone wants to buy our equipment, and we're going to ramp up the work of the contractors who make it. They're brilliant, but they're doing it slowly. We need to push their PID and give them the opportunity to achieve this faster. Unfortunately, we have to do this. But if you look at our Patriots, our Tomahawks, well, if we're talking about our tanks, you wouldn't want to be behind the wheel of one of those tanks. We would feel very calm and protected. But there are also javelins, that's what they're called. And I gave them javelins. Remember how they said Trump gave them javelins and Obama gave them sheets?
Notice Trump can't understand why Ukraine is filled with hatred toward him. After all, without his help, Russia would have captured Ukraine in 4 or 5 days, just as they planned. Ukrainians are heroes. But besides blankets, Biden and Obama gave nothing to Ukraine, while Trump gave javelins and all kinds of other weapons. And the Russians are polite and constantly lie, says Trump. Ukrainians don't acknowledge any help and are always resentful. Neither I with the university nor Trump with both countries. No one could understand them. Either God took away their reason or they did it themselves. Their main quality in the eastern corner of the European continent is non-stop, shameless lying and hatred, especially towards everyone they lie about. Secondly, Trump met with Netanyahu twice. On the agenda, of course, are Gaza, Iran, Russia, and peace.
The President and I adhere to a doctrine called peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. Our decisive actions, President Trump's firm decision to act with us against those who seek to destroy Israel and threaten peace around the world, have brought about remarkable changes. In the Middle East, outstanding American B-2 pilots have demonstrated remarkable perseverance, determination, and strength. The soldiers of Israel fought like lions, our pilots struck like lightning, and our united alliance thundered like a storm. And this brings great changes to our region. There are opportunities for peace that we intend to realize. We are working on this together. We still have to finish the job in Gaza, free all our hostages, and eliminate and destroy the military and administrative capabilities of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Because Gaza must have a different future for us, for everyone, and no country would agree to less. We certainly won't agree to less.
Today's mission is clear: to completely destroy Hamas and bring back all the hostages that these beasts are holding in underground cells, torturing and abusing them.
The Prime Minister will review the United States plan on humanitarian aid access.
We have accepted the proposal that came from the mediators. It's a good proposal. It aligns with Steve Witkoff's original idea, and we believe we have come closer to it. And I hope that we can cross this line. That is our goal. I think the less I talk about this publicly, the more likely we are to achieve it.
What do you think about Qatar's role in the negotiations right now?
Look, I think the main thing is to achieve results. We'll talk about the process later. I have something to say about this, but right now I'm completely focused on the result, just like President Trump. And we're working together. It's very important to understand that. We're working together. Because we understood, and the whole world understood, that when Israel and America stand shoulder to shoulder, great things happen. This has never happened before. Yes, throughout history, almost 80 years, now we are 77 years old. In all 77 years of Israel's history, there has never been such a level of coordination, cooperation, and trust between America and Israel as there is today. And I attribute this outstanding achievement to President Trump.
Nowhere, said Bibi, in all of Israel's history has there been such trust, such open and honest coordination as exists between Israel and the United States today. And this, said Bibi, is the merit of Donald J. Trump. And what is happening with the Democrats, with the Democratic Party? How has their attitude changed since they hate everything that Trump loves?
Prime Minister, are you concerned about polls showing that support for Israel in the United States is declining, especially among Democrats?
Well, of course, I'm interested in maintaining the tremendous support that Israel has always had. I think there is a deliberate campaign to spread slander and demonize Israel on social media. This is targeted, it's funded, it's malicious, and we intend to fight it. Because nothing defeats lies like the truth, and we will spread the truth so everyone can see it. When people are confronted with the facts, we win unconditionally. That's what we're going to do in the coming months and years.
Well, Netanyahu, the Democrat, didn't want to offend. He didn't say something like, "You're a bunch of stinky goats." No, although he could have. And I think he really wanted to. But instead he said, "You're being deceived, and your brains have been so thoroughly cleaned out that you haven't had your own thoughts in a long time." Do you want to hear how Ukraine and Zelensky should have behaved? But two things are lacking: wisdom and upbringing.
To pass a law allowing the transfer of B-2 and B-52 bombers, as well as bunker-busting bombs, directly to the Israeli army. Would you like the United States to do that?
I would like Israel to have the same capabilities as the United States. Yes, of course, we would like that. Who wouldn't want that? But we are grateful for the help we have received. And I believe that this serves not only the security interests of Israel, but also the security of America and the entire free world. I won't go into details. There are many more topics to discuss here and many different aspects that are better discussed in more confidential formats.
Of course, said Bibi. We would like to have what the United States has, definitely, but we are infinitely grateful for the help and support that America is giving us now. But as for the details, gentlemen, we'll talk behind closed doors. Simple, clear, respectful.
Interesting, Kevin. Yesterday, the president announced plans to send new defensive weapons to Ukraine. And at the same cabinet meeting that Kristen just mentioned, he spoke about his dissatisfaction with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin is once again kind of stepping away from his main views on many issues.
And even leaving from there, where he really was over the past 10 years, when you think about Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin, these are some of the most fascinating relationships in the world. And for a long time, Trump took a conciliatory position toward the Russian leader. This is changing very, very quickly. And you can hear President Trump becoming increasingly irritated with Putin as he rejects his attempts to end the war in Ukraine. And also as he intensifies his attacks on Ukraine. He is also amassing troops in the north of that country, in effect, so to speak, challenging Trump's attempts to achieve peace. Today, I think these were his toughest statements about Putin ever. Listen to what he said.
We are not happy with Putin. I am not pleased with him. I can say that now. Because he's killing a lot of people. Many of them are his soldiers and their soldiers. Right now, it's basically reaching 7-0 a week, and I am not happy with Putin.
He said he would approve these new sanctions against Russia, which I think leaves open the question of where he will direct this anger towards Putin. He doesn't say that he's going to impose sanctions. He says that he will send new defensive weapons to Ukraine, which is important because, remember, just last week the administration said it would suspend these arms deliveries while assessing American stockpiles. President Trump, after speaking with Volodymyr Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, last week seemed ready to help Ukraine with its air defense. Now he says that he has approved these new weapons. And in fact, when our colleague Caitlin Collins asked him at that cabinet meeting who actually approved this pause, he replied that he didn't know.
It's really interesting also because we've heard from both the Pentagon and the State Department, Defense Secretary Peter Ksett as well. They were also on the other side of this issue, aside from the fact that Trump's position on these matters keeps changing.
Yeah, I mean, Trump actually made an interesting point there. Whether you think the United States has given the Ukrainians too much, or you think the United States has spent too much money on the war there. And that's his position. That's the position he took during his election campaign. Many people in his cabinet held the same position. He said, whether you believe it or not, you have to admit that Ukrainians are brave people. They've been holding on in this conflict for so long. They were ready to use these weapon systems, which are dangerous to operate. And it seems that he leans toward the view that the RFS really should support Ukraine in this conflict. They've been holding on for so long. And they were able to push Russia back in some aspects, in ways that many did not expect at the beginning of this war. It's obvious that his relationship with Zelensky is developing. And actually, he said during that call last week that everything is fine. And Zelensky even noted that it was their best conversation to date. I think it's quite obvious that the president's view on this war is kind of developing, evolving. He wants to help Ukraine defend itself.
Having finally realized that Putin is taking him for a fool, Trump changes his position. Earlier, the Russians said that as soon as Ukraine does this, we will immediately respond. There were all sorts of assurances, all kinds of respect. Trump kept pressuring Ukraine and finally got what he wanted. And at that very moment when he succeeded, Ukraine said, okay, and Putin started to backpedal. That's why the pressure from the United States on Ukraine has eased, while the pressure on Russia will increase, slowly increase. More air defense systems for Ukraine, more other weapons, more ammunition, more intelligence, more threats to Russia. That the bill proposed by Leslie Graham and Blumenthal, the one with 500% on third parties, will be passed and signed by the president. Achieving peace in Africa, that's Congo and Rwanda, achieving peace in Asia, Pakistan, and India. By reducing the risk of an explosion in the Middle East, Trump is shifting the pressure point from Ukraine to Russia. What he is coming up with, what he will come up with, we may find out, or we may not. But the shift in United States policy has become obvious as of today. I recently mentioned that Russia is bypassing sanctions with the help of a huge fleet of such unregistered oil tankers, or rather they are registered in various loopholes in different corners and so on and so forth, as if they do not belong to Russia. Their logs say that they haven't entered Russia. Well, basically all sorts of tricks. And they go somewhere, bypassing the routes that such ships usually take. So it was done in such a way that everything was clean with the documents, everything was perfect. And that's why Western countries don't really have grounds to stop them or shoot at them, but the Ukrainians do.
Ukraine's operation is aimed at the very heart of Russia's shadow fleet of oil tankers, which sail under flags of convenience to bypass Western sanctions. These vessels are a vital artery for Moscow, transporting oil to fund its war machine, and Ukraine is striking them all over the world. These cover all of Europe. Ukraine has attacked vessels of Russia's shadow fleet in the Black, Baltic, and Mediterranean seas, with only the first of these three seas being directly connected to the active phase of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Giversi have become Ukraine's calling card, and drones its tools for destroying huge Russian tankers. Each attack on Russia's shadow fleet is a true masterclass in Ukrainian cunning and ingenuity, aimed at striking Putin where it hurts most, his wallet, from which he finances the invasion of Ukraine.
This is the right tactic to develop instead of capturing useless villages in the Russian territories bordering Ukraine. But to turn things around, to cut the umbilical cord, so to speak, to cut off their lifeline, stopping the flow of money to Russia is what Trump would do, and Natalia, that's exactly the right thing to do.
Thanks to the constantly growing shadow fleet of unregistered and illegal ships, Russia continues to sell resources and receive income to finance Putin's war. Now, all of this may come to an end. Ukraine has realized the danger of the shadow fleet and is carrying out targeted strikes that destroy illegal Russian ships. And there are more attacks on the shadow fleet than many people think. Marca lists 5 cases, starting with a tanker called Sailing Under the Flag of the Gorshalov Islands on January 28th. This tanker was moving along the Black Sea coast of Turkey. That's when it was attacked, although Ukraine did not confirm its involvement in the strike. It is believed that it was a Ukrainian naval drone that delivered a powerful explosive charge which made a 3-foot wide hole in the hull. Marca explains that the tanker's power plant was disabled and it was left immobilized in the water. And this is how Ukraine sent a signal to Putin. The loss of one tanker is not a serious blow to Russia. Russia can survive such a loss. What worries Putin much more is that the shadow fleet travels along hidden and supposedly secret routes to avoid Western sanctions. Ukraine's strike showed Putin that it is monitoring the routes Russia uses. And just as importantly, it is ready to project its power far beyond the front lines of the war in Ukraine to prevent Russia from using its shadow fleet.
The theater of military operations is now not only the region of Ukraine and Russia, but the whole world. Well, except for the territories of modern sovereign states, the ocean is actually outside the jurisdiction of individual countries, outside the zone of ownership, or as they call them, territorial waters. They call it the ocean.
5. The attack on January 28 was just the beginning. On February 4, Ukraine launched a new strike. This time the target was a vessel called Grace Ferrum, sailing under the Liberian flag. This vessel arrived in Tobruk, Libya, which, according to Markey, is a center of Russian oil trade bypassing sanctions. It is believed that Ukraine used a drone again, as a powerful explosion tore the vessel from the inside, disabling its propeller shaft and causing massive damage. As a result, the ship's owners had to spend significant funds on a salvage operation. In its report on the incident, a new Ukrainian publication stated that data on the vessel's movements for salvage operations showed it had recently entered a Russian port. Ukraine knew exactly what it was doing, both in choosing the target and the method. The sinking of the vessel Grace Ferrum did not occur. That was never Ukraine's goal. Just like with Sea Charm, Ukraine struck the vessel's power plant to leave it immobilized. This was another message to Putin. Ukraine did not intend to act carelessly when striking the Shadow Fleet. Every strike had to be precise, carefully planned, and carried out so professionally that accusations could never be directed against Ukraine. And even if that were the case, Putin would have no grounds, because he knows that accusing Ukraine would mean exposing his illegal use of the vessels Ukraine struck to circumvent sanctions. That is, Russia
cannot appeal to an international court. This is not their so-called oil and not their so-called ships. Plus, Ukraine isn't spilling oil, so there's nothing to complain about, like they're doing something wrong there. You know, when something happens to an oil carrier out in the ocean, God forbid a huge amount of oil starts leaking from it. No, they've learned to hit the engine room precisely to destroy the engine and the steering system.
Ukraine struck again on February 15th. Ukraine launched a new strike on February 15th. This time the target was a vessel. It was sailing under the Maltese flag and was moored in the Italian ports of Savona and Vado. 24 reported this incident, noting that a couple of explosions shook the vessel while it was docked and preparing to unload. And once again, Ukraine carefully chose its target, although Siadziwel was sailing under the Maltese flag. According to 24, it was on the list of illegal vessels that Russia used to transport oil to countries of the European Union or the European Union. The vessel carried Russian cargo at least 3 times in 2024, in February, March, and May. The same source reports that the crew of the vessel heard 2 loud explosions, and a subsequent investigation showed that the concave deformations on the hull indicated the use of explosive devices. The result was the same as in the first 2 attacks. Sidgwell was disabled but did not sink. Ukraine once again conducted a masterclass in camouflage, which, according to Farak, would have included the simultaneous use of real-time tracking and undercover agents to disable the vessel. After all, the explosions didn't happen by themselves. Ukraine would have had to secretly get an agent onto the vessel to plant bombs in places where the rest of the crew would never think to look. This gave Putin even more to think about. Now Ukraine was targeting the ships of his shadow fleet in more distant European waters. In addition, Russia clearly had a problem with secret agents operating on its territory. If not in Russia, then these agents could be operating in Italy. And somehow they managed to get onto a ship that was supposed to be well guarded. In any case, this is a problem for Putin. Nevertheless, so many of Putin's questions about how Ukraine manages to pull all this off remain unanswered.
That is, there are quite a few people in Russia who are helping Ukraine, just like in Iran. It turned out there were quite a few people who were willing and happy to help Israel, Or just people who are grateful that Israel and America are doing everything to make sure the Ayatollahs are kicked out of their country, like...
While Putin was worried about Ukrainian attacks on his shadow fleet in Europe, Ukrainian covert operatives were preparing something much closer to home. Later in February, Ukraine struck the vessel Koala, which was sailing under the flag of Antigua and Barbuda. This time, Ukraine's strike took place in the Russian port of Yestruga, which is located on the Baltic Sea. This attack was an escalation. The story with Koala was the same as with the other 3 ships, in terms of damage. The explosion disabled its propulsion system and destroyed the engines. The vessel was left immobilized, but like Ukraine's other targets, it was not sunk. But this time, Ukraine struck in Russian waters. This time the strike was deep. And the message was that Ukraine has operatives capable of striking Russia, inside Russia itself at any moment.
Then the attacks on ships stopped. Trump demanded that Ukraine show a willingness to move toward peace. Now the situation has changed. Trump realized that instead of having grown-up conversations, they were trying to play childish games with him and just wasting his time. And Ukraine resumes its strikes.
And that leads to June 29th. And that brings us to June 29th and the most recent attack by Ukraine's shadow fleet. The ship Vilamora was struck off the coast of Benghazi, Libya. Sailing under the Maltese flag, the vessel was hit by a powerful explosion. The method of the attack clearly indicated who was behind it. The propeller shaft and steering system were destroyed, leaving the ship afloat but practically useless. Once again, Ukraine demonstrated to Putin that it knows the routes and ports used by his shadow vessels for transporting cargo. Ruthlessly and efficiently, Ukraine destroyed another vessel that was key to Putin's oil trade.
I strongly suspect that a couple of Israelis, possibly of Ukrainian origin, are sitting either in Kyiv or, by the way, maybe in their own Petah Tikva or Netanya, and they're mapping out the routes for this very illegal operation for Putin's fake fleet. I strongly suspect that Bibi knows about this, but of course I have no proof. Well, and there can't be any.
The shadow fleet is far from being destroyed, but every strike that Ukraine delivers results in cargo losses and forces Russia to invest in new ships. And if Ukraine can keep it up, it will deal a huge blow to Russia's revenues at a time when Putin's decisions have already brought its economy to the brink of collapse.
Gas and oil are the biggest and main, practically the only, sources of Russian income. Without them, Russia won't be able to wage war against Ukraine or anyone else. I have a feeling that Trump will now go where it hurts Russia the most. The days of confidence that the Ukrainian-Russian conflict can be resolved through discussion and a cool assessment of what's happening are over. Yes, gentlemen. Below in the description, you will find a link to a gift, my book, a collection of stories, historical anecdotes, tales, and riddles called Capitalism 101, which is an introductory course to entertaining capitalism. It's also a collection of methods that can easily make you, well, not a billionaire, but just a millionaire. Yes, if you learn how to apply them, of course. And this knowledge will also help you live a happier life in your family and be more successful in any group. Click on the link, leave your contact information, and you'll receive my book Plus, absolutely free, a daily 10-minute video that will improve your mood for the whole day. And one more thing, I need to transfer several $1,000s to Russia. I can't use crypto, MoneyGram, or, so to speak, other services like Telegram or paid intermediaries. If you have money in Russia and you want to get dollars here, Leave your contact information in the comments and I will get in touch with you. Well, now about the Greenland.
Greenland. The world is busy discussing how Trump wants to buy Greenland from Denmark, while China is quietly trying to take over the island, and no one is talking about it.
In America, as well as in Denmark and Greenland, there is concern about possible Chinese infiltration into the country. China's words and actions raise doubts about its intentions.
In 2016, the government of Greenland put up for sale an old naval base called Grundtvig. It was closed in 2014, and the Danish military no longer needed it. And then a company appeared that was interested in buying the base, but suddenly in the same year, Denmark quietly prevented this company from purchasing the abandoned military base. This was surprising because Denmark had no plans to reopen Grundtvig, and officials were already discussing its demolition. So why did Denmark cancel this deal then? Because it understood the consequences of handing over this territory to a company originating from the People's Republic of China. Danish Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen secretly intervened, contacting political leaders and persuading them to remove the base from the market. Suddenly, Denmark had new military reasons to keep the base. He stated that the military needed this base again. But was that really the case? As soon as China showed interest, everything changed. You see, Denmark and its intelligence services are quite concerned about China's growing interest in Greenland. They were worried that if China gained too much economic influence in Greenland, it would be able to start putting pressure on the local government, so that it would make decisions more in favor of China than Denmark. As you know, Greenland has broad autonomy, but it is still part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and it is Denmark that is responsible for Greenland's defense and foreign affairs. Greenland is a country with a population of only 56,000 people, 80% of whose territory is covered by ice. How foolish would China be if it spent its efforts on such an insignificant country? Or are we missing something that these numbers don't tell us? Because even the most powerful man on the planet right now, Mr. Trump, recently made a statement about buying Greenland. In fact, this is already the 5th time that the United States has mentioned acquiring Greenland from Denmark. So why are all these superpowers so desperately seeking Greenland? And how has China quietly expanded its influence in Greenland for decades? And most importantly, what is being done to prevent China from taking over this island? China's interest in Greenland is not new. It all started in 2005, when the Prime Minister of Greenland, Hans Enoksen, visited China. This was the first serious sign that China had started to pay attention to Greenland. A few years later, in 2011, Greenland's Minister of Industry and Natural Resources also went to China, where he was received by the Vice Premier. This showed that China was not only showing interest, but also open to building strong relationships. Then, in 2012, China went even further. Qiu Haixi, China's Minister of Land and Natural Resources, visited Greenland. This made it clear that China was becoming increasingly serious about cooperating with Greenland. Since then, both sides have remained interested in each other, holding talks on business, trade, and investment.
In other words, Ottawa will send troops into Alberta, but at Alberta's request, the United States will send ours in from the other side. And at this point, either Alberta leaves with us or the rest starve to death. Or all of Canada starts negotiating about something common, something joint. For example, borders around the perimeter of both countries, instead of between them. One army, one foreign policy for everyone. And does anyone really think that we won't also explain to Greenland that maybe they really want, even dream of becoming part of this union, but they can only join if they ask us very nicely? Do we not care who will get the income from the minerals? For example, in Denmark and Norway, about half of these countries' budgets, well, it's a bit different in each case, are funded by shared rights to minerals, for instance. By the way, that's what corrupted these countries, but that's their business, not ours. Everyone decides how to live. Strange people grow up and become stronger when they have to overcome problems and fight poverty. Let's say all the time, like Israel. For example, knowing that relaxing means civilian casualties, like it was on October 7th with Hamas. And if you keep relaxing, the entire population of the country will be destroyed. Getting paid for doing nothing isn't very good for relaxing. But look at the American Indians who have become alcoholics. They were raised in struggle, overcoming obstacles. They once lived their own, so to speak, life, but now look at them here. It's not like they had a lot of culture there, or many factories producing things, or that they had plenty to eat. It's not like they didn't kill each other and cut out each other's organs there. It's not like civilization was developing there at all. That's not what I'm talking about now. When they needed to overcome something, they were strong, they were confident in themselves. Look at them now, raised in struggle in overcoming obstacles. And people from the country, by the way, become strong, hardened, and able to find ways out of difficult situations. Well, let's get back to Greenland, I think very soon. Well, maybe under Trump, or maybe under his successor, his heir. The United States of America, Canada, Alaska, and Greenland will form something like a union, a pact, a joint state, or something else. Administratively, I don't know what it will be called, but what will it be? To act together, to protect common interests, and to build a real paradise on Earth based on a free market. Ladies and gentlemen, and not on the basis of unnatural socialism, as Europe is trying to do communism, as they tried to do in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or fascism, as China is doing now. I think this will be our answer to globalism and collectivism in any form. Because America, ladies and gentlemen, is becoming great again, the spirit of the pioneers is starting to return once more. The spirit. What are pioneers? There's nothing there. They're the first ones who came to us. Moderate leftists. Or uncertain right-wingers. They always want to prove that besides black and white, there are many other colors of the rainbow. And I think this way. Either what you created is yours, and then it's freedom, or what you created is not yours. And fully or partially, for some reason, it belongs to someone else. Well, there can be any number of reasons, and as many as you like. So if it belongs to someone, if it fully or partially belongs to someone, then it's either slavery or communism. By the way, slavery and communism are two sides of the same coin. I would even say it's the same thing. Because many of my acquaintances often say that you can be relatively pregnant or relatively free. Yes, they take part of yours without your permission, but otherwise you are free. No, gentlemen, it means either you are pregnant, well, usually it's women. In my memory and life, yes. Either not, either there's a fetus developing inside your body, or not, either you are free or you are someone's slaves. No matter what they call you, even if they call you the freest people in the world and keep adding reasons why you are the freest, because Grandpa Lenin is the best grandpa in the world, you have to love him more than your own grandpa. All right, gentlemen, that's all for today. I think today's program was interesting. Write to me what you think about this. Goodbye. Subtitles created by